All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, July 29th. So, big week of events, none bigger than the Beyond Meat earnings call. Apparently, they announced a secondary after hours. So, they were implying an 18% move for earnings, which would get you down to about 182. So it looks like they're not moving as much as they were implying for earnings. But I think they do that sometimes, especially for a newer report when they don't have much history. But you could see how much this is really moving around the S&P a lot here in after hours. No, it's not. I'm, I'm just kidding. I don't think this kind of stuff really moves around the market. Had a question earlier about what names would kind of move in sympathy. I don't really think anything. This is kind of its own in its own world. Not much of a correlation to the overall market. In my opinion, not much of a correlation to anything else. Maybe it gives an overall sense of risk appetite when you have, a name that makes veggie burgers going up this much, but it kind of just tells me that overall there's a decent amount of speculation in the market. All right, so moving on. It wasn't that much of a mover day. Besides the overall software group, the overall market was down. Small caps were down on the day. This is again percentage change from the open in this column. Over here is percentage change for the day. But small cap. Remember this morning futures were about flat when we kind of came in, but we did get hit with some selling pressure. Not that much. I do think that this is at this point, maybe there's a little bit of people taking some money off the table, just ahead of the events for the week, FOMC. By the way, we do get the Bank of Japan tonight, which I don't think they're expecting very much. But I think all eyes will be on FOMC. I think also that this trade meeting that's going on will have some ramifications if anything major comes out of it. I don't think they're really expecting much to happen. I think the expectations are pretty low. And then, of course, we've got a whole bunch of earnings reports, and some of which reported after today, but we get Apple later in the week after the close on Tuesday. Apple had a pretty nice day. There was a VPOC sitting up here for Apple. It got pretty close to being taken out. Let's see. It's right there. So, that may be something that had to be taken out. But I think the daily chart, it did get a price target. Apple did get a price target raise, but it's kind of just floating above this, gravitating above that downward trend line, moving in the right direction. So we'll see. We'll see what that name does. I don't know if I'm going to play this yet for earnings, but we'll tackle that tomorrow. The other move this today was really within the software group. A lot of software names got hit. They did come back from the lows, a lot of them. You could see I've got a few of them kind of set up over here, but you could see the move from the open. Things like TTD, which was up big on Friday, was down 6.5%. MDB was down 8.3%. But you see, you've got a whole bunch of names that were down around 4 or 5%. Is this shocking? And there was a Barron's report out this weekend that I even put out on Twitter. But no, I mean, I think this group, it does this, right? And when you're dealing with a high valuation group, it's going to sell off from time to time. What you want to pay attention to is the next couple days, even that day itself, what names are going to see buyers come back into. Because this is something that we've seen multiple times now, and buyers come back into these names, sometimes within a day, sometimes a couple days, sometimes a couple weeks. Microsoft was kind of interesting. I did not trade this one today. I traded a couple other names, but Microsoft buyers came right back into this one. This was a good place, and you could see kind of what to kind of think about for the next couple days. If there isn't, let's say that the Fed cuts a quarter of a point, and I'll apply what I think is going to happen. They say, hey, we're open to future rate cuts. We're going to be data dependent. I think if they say something like that and the market happens to sell off a little bit on it, or if something else happens this week and the market sells off, as long as the Fed doesn't really move too far away from that, saying that they'll be accommodative if needed, then my prediction is that I think it's kind of game on for this market, but you got to be careful a little bit sometimes because if we start to get a little bit ahead of ourselves, maybe like the software group was doing, uh, and cyber names as well, then you just have to be careful with your risk, and you have to make sure that you're taking targets. Right? There's really nothing like and I just wanted to illustrate this point because I know some people think that sometimes they see some type of a hint in the charts, which you do sometimes, but I don't think there was really much of anything from Friday. IGV made a new 52-week high. There really wasn't much of anything to say that this group was going to get hit over the head. And I think that's just sometimes if you're like really looking into the charts and looking for a signal, sometimes you'll be able to see it where you get a little bit of a hint, sometimes you don't. And the only real way to kind of help with the situation is to make sure that you're taking targets. And that's my take. Even if you're a long-term trend trader, uh, there's places that you want to kind of take a little bit of money off the table, in my opinion, right? I know pure trend traders, they don't like to do that. They like to really stick with the trend for as long as it has. But really, if you're using trailing stops and so forth, but, on the highs to me, and again, some people can maybe argue with me on this, but I see no problem taking a little bit off the table. Again, not the whole trade, but you take a little bit off, and then if you get a dip, you can get right back in. So let's go over some more names. We'll talk about today's option activity. What did perform pretty well? The gold miners. They were up overall 1.9. This was a chart that we sent out on the private Twitter about GDX. Let's see if I can get that for you. If you look here, we sent this a couple hours ago, basically saying if it can get above the short-term moving average, right, we're already above value for the month. So this is why I use sometimes value areas. This is why sometimes I use moving averages. But I said, hey, if we could get above maybe Friday's open, which would kind of be very similar to the 5-period moving average, I think it triggers a buy. The only thing that you have to be a little bit careful, because I put on a small position here. Why did I only put on a small position? Because gold is going to move like crazy with these central bank meetings that we've got going on. So I would not want to position unless I really had a good feel for what the Fed is going to do. If they're going to be super accommodative, more quantitative easing, then gold and gold miners should probably go up. If they're not, then probably gold will come in a little bit. That's the general rule. That's the general relationship. Do I know if that's going to work perfectly? No, I don't. I don't. But that's the general relationship. So that was interesting. Also, XLV, we've got a couple big earnings reports from the healthcare companies. Notice J&J has been rebounding pretty decently from the lows. That's one of the biggest weights in XLV. Also notice this VPOC was taken out, so you're reversing very nicely on that. That's something that we talked about in the trading room last week as maybe taking a shot at J&J on that move with the VPOC being taken out. But XLV, a lot of buying going on. Short dated, I view front month August calls being short dated, just going out a couple weeks. So yeah, I would think, and maybe there's something else going on, but my guess is Lilly reports, Merck reports tomorrow, so maybe they're positioning for that a little bit. Also, the technicals don't look that bad. That was a trade that I also put a starter position on today as well. What else did I trade today? Just to kind of go over, Roku. This thing was down like, I don't know, 8-9% or something like that, or maybe maybe a little bit less than that, maybe 6 or 7%. With this VPOC being taken out, I thought it was a good shot to go to take a shot at a long. I did that a couple times today and made money on both sides. I took some profits here. I had the last position on here, and I actually re-added a position and then took it off close to the end of the day. Very nice. We had a couple traders trade Amazon as well this morning. Straight down till about 12:30, and then basically straight up. Nice recovery. Not back to the close, but at some point, it's usually 3 days. I usually wait, but you got a nice almost a hammer bar on the 50-day moving average. So I think that's pretty good. And again, sometimes it's the usual 3-day rule where you start to see buyers come back into a name that's beaten down a little bit. A few other names that we saw call buying in Google. We did see some call buying, some short dated and longer dated calls in Google. I went over this. We do a midday. I've been doing when something interesting is going on. I do a midday video and send that out just to go over the option activity. By the way, if you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group and you want to see our weekend video, what we put together, you can email me and I'm happy to send that over to you, just so you get a gauge. If you're thinking about being a member of Tribeca Trade Group and you want to know what it's all about, happy to send that over to you. All right, so that's August 13th. August. What did I see here? There was a couple spreads that we saw. I think this was one of them. Oh, nope, that's not it. Yep, here it is. December 1300, 1360 is going out to December. I have to check open interest on that. One of these, I think, has some open interest on it. Yeah, this one does. This actually matched open interest, so they're probably rolling this position. Now, even though it's marked as a spread, I think what they do sometimes is they roll it. So being that it almost exactly matches open interest, I would imagine what they're doing. That's what they're doing. And they did that with some shorter dated calls too. I think September's as well. This one was puts versus calls. So it looks like there was some action in there with Google today. Just looking at a few other things here in terms of option activity. Mentioned there's a little bit more of cat call buying. MJ saw some put buying on it. Some LK calls again. Penn saw some calls going up. A lot of pre-option stuff, like Sony had 5,000 block of calls, but really, you don't know what they're doing when they do something like that the day before earnings. A couple trades like that hit the tape. A couple other names that I'm watching. ATVI had a really nice candle today. Look at how far this thing went down and recovered. So this thing is still trying to break out of this sideways. But wow, if you caught this thing on the lows, I did not. But really nice move up. Oh, what else did I trade today? Considering I did not trade that one. A little bit of Eve from the lows. Was able to take to get out of this right in the last hour of the day. Put some on here at around the lows, which existed for about 4 or 5 hours today. Again, which ones of these names rebounded pretty decently? I would keep an eye on this Coop. That did pretty well today in terms of rebounding. Again, some of them, they're kind of left holes in them. Twilio, I think, was interesting. I was expecting this thing to come back more, considering it reports earnings tomorrow. A couple names that reported after the close, besides Beyond Meat. Ring Central, look at this thing up to 137. So, again, they've been talking about valuation concerns with the software companies for well over a year, probably a year and a half. That's going to be the situation with them, with high price stocks. Does it mean the trend is over? No, I don't think so. I think they have plenty of growth still to go. Is my take, but again, it's one of those situations where you just have to make sure that you're taking some money off the table when these things really break out pretty decently, so that you don't get caught. What else in terms of today's performers? We talked about software. Banks had a tough time getting going today too, so not much going on there. So that's it for today's video. I think we got plenty of things going on for later in the week. I think you just have to kind of be a little bit aware of how you're positioning this week. We're continuing to see a lot of VIX positioning. That put to call ratio is super, super low. So it seems like people are buying some volatility here with the VIX around 12. I do think that makes sense with all these events coming up. That something, besides a Barron's article, is going to cause some volatility for the overall market, right? The Barron's just caused some volatility. Barron's article just caused a little bit of volatility, and I'm not sure if even if I would completely blame it on them, but I would think one of these events this week is going to get volatility cooking a little bit, at least coming up from the 12 level. Maybe it kind of comes up, but we went over this in the weekend video as well, so I'm not going to duplicate. All right, guys, so that is it. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.